Um, yeah, I was wondering where I was going to, like one of the things that I was thinking I couldn't really uh, write something as soon as Tuesday, but I was looking for something in some of my old notes in Revelation, and I don't think it was this that I was looking for. It's actually about the title deed of the earth. Um, but I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is related to the topic that we're talking about, and so I kind of like took it and kind of rearranged it. And there's some perspectives that I've kind of changed my mind on about whatever. But um, so I titled this one "The Redemption of Earth," because we did one on the resurrection, and the idea, and we already kind of explored, the idea that if God is going to redeem um, our bodies, along with it is the idea of the redemption of Earth, and so it's one of those things that we've kind of lost sight of. Of course, we when we die, we go to heaven and we are in paradise with Christ and everything, but that there is still earth. And even in this week's studying, like I found one writer and I was reading kind of what he was writing, and he made some good points and then jumped right to but the earth is just going to be destroyed and everything. So it's where, and then he starts talking about eternity in heaven. And I was thinking, well, that's kind of like it was an explicit, sort of assertion of, the earth is just going to be gotten rid of. And to me, that's always sort of, missed the story or kind of even destroys the story in a way. And so we're looking at, God likes what he created. He thought it was good, and just because it's been tainted by sin, well, God is going to take care of it, not by getting rid of it, but getting rid of what caused the tainting, which is sin and death. And he's going to make all things new. He's going to renew all things, and he does that through his work on the cross and because of who he is. And so this is another just piece of that story, and I think another lens to look through. And it's about the kinsman redeemer. So I called the redemption of earth, but I could have easily called it the kinsman redeemer of earth, or Jesus being the kinsman redeemer of earth. So we're looking at the idea that earth is man's inheritance, and I've always thought, when Jesus said, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, that well, it's not a great inheritance if it's just going to be destroyed. The meek shall inherit the earth, although I'm going to destroy the earth. Well, so they lose their inheritance kind of before they've really regained it. It's never really made sense to me to look at it that way. So earth is man's inheritance, and the earth was given to mankind as an inheritance. In Psalm 115:16, it says, "The highest heavens belong to the Lord, but the earth he has given to mankind." And it means it in several different ways, not just as an inheritance, but also that it comes under our co-regency under God. Uh, so in Genesis 1:28, of course, it says that God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." So God is king and owner of everything, but he has made man co-regent and the inheritor of the earth. The fall was man's rebellion from co-regency. In other words, that man decided that he was going to act as a independent agent, somebody independent from God. But if you're going to be an independent regent, you can't really be a co-regent with God anymore. And for that reason, you could say that he's not eligible to receive and inherit the earth as an inheritance from God, because God is the king of the earth. So the fall was man's rebellion from co-regency and caused him to lose the inheritance. But through Christ, this inheritance is restored to the faithful. For example, the meek shall inherit the earth. Those who are Christ will inherit the earth. They are co-inheritors with Christ. Abraham was promised an inheritance. So God promised Abraham and his offspring a land. And we're familiar with the story. Everything that you see here, is I'm giving to you and your offspring as an inheritance. In Genesis 12, it says, the Lord appeared to Abraham and said, to your offspring, I will give this land. So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. Now, Paul takes this story and he expands our understanding of it. So because Paul shows that the giving of the land, first of all, was an inheritance, and that the offspring that were mentioned here was all the faithful, because it's or all of those who have faith and put their faith in God. And what was promised to them wasn't just a particular real estate in the Middle East, but it was the entire world. In Romans 4, it says, for the promise to Abraham and his offspring that he would be heir to the world. Where did Paul get that from? He would be heir to the world, did not come through the law, but through the righteousness of faith. Skipping forward, that is why it depends on faith, in order that the promise may rest on grace and be guaranteed to all his offspring, not only the adherent of the law, but also the one who shares the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. As it is written, I've made you the father of many nations. So it's, we are, as Gentiles, part of those many nations who share the faith of Abraham. And Paul points out that that we are his offspring. And because we are his offspring, that inheritance goes to us. And it's not just that strip of land, it's the entire world, as he puts here. He says the offspring, that they would be heir of the world. The land laws of Israel. Okay, so the promises to Abraham and Israel were bigger than they might seem on the surface. You read the story, in isolation, then you think of it as one thing, but then it through the story of the Bible shows to be something much, much bigger, right? So ultimately, the story of Abraham and the land that he saw, it serves as the microcosm for the larger picture. So in keeping with that picture, the land laws that God gave Israel are also a microcosm of the grand story of the redeemed man and earth. In other words, whatever laws that that God gave the 12 tribes are going to prove to be something bigger than just the laws for Israel. They pointed to something much larger. God chose the land of Israel as his own. Israel belongs to God. In the same way, the earth belongs to God. God is the landlord, and man is the tenant possessor. This is one way of looking at it. And actually, I got a lot of these notes from a preacher named Jesse Boyd. So I should give him a bit of credit here, because I changed a lot of it, but I did take his outlines and kind of rearranged them and changed them to suit my needs for this. But this is the way he expresses it. God is the landlord, man is the tenant possessor. He gave the land to Israel to possess as an inheritance forever as a tenant possessor. God appointed the tribes to their lands, and their lands were to be kept within their tribes and their families. Sale of a piece of land was more like what we would call a lease. So if you sold a piece of property, even though you read that so and so sold their land to so and so, the understanding was that it wasn't a sale forever. The land was always supposed to go back to the owner one way or another, and if nothing else, it would return to the original owner on the year of Jubilee. The same thing would apply in the final Jubilee, that the land will return to its first rightful owner, which is mankind, or in Christ, who's our Jubilee. So it was wrong to lose your land to another tribe or to another people forever. And in the same way, it was wrong for man to lose possession to a being outside of mankind, which would be, what Jesse Boyd is thinking here, of course, is Satan. It's actually a forfeited inheritance. That Adam forfeited his inheritance, you could say. So just as Israel was forbidden to lose forever their tenant possession, it was also wrong for man to forfeit forever his inheritance. Jesse Boyd puts it this way. He says, man despised his tenant possession, kind of using that language from Esau despising his inheritance. And it was usurped by Satan, or forfeited to Satan. Now, there's kind of like a couple ways that people look at it, and they go, well, is Satan really a legitimate, that he's not really a legitimate ruler, or, so some people think that he is, some people think that he isn't, but somehow Satan was able to make a claim to Jesus that he didn't dispute in any case, that he had these kingdoms of the world. So if you look at Luke 4, 5-6, it says the devil took Jesus with him and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time and said to him, to you I will give all this authority and their glory, for it has been delivered to me, and I give it to whom I will. And this isn't responded to with an argument about that point with Christ. So, but in any case, we do know that in different ways that the devil is called the ruler of this age, and other things, that he does have, because people have followed him and have become his children, that he does rule in a sense. So Adam was tempted with the proposition that suggested that he could rise above the position of tenant possessor and become landlord. In other words, you can take of this knowledge of good and evil, and you will become like God. And to Adam and Eve, it sounded like something they would want to do. Why don't we make decisions just like God would make decisions for ourselves? But in that sense, yeah, they kind of they were tempted in a way to take matters into their own hands. And one way that you could describe that is to rise above the position of tenant possessor and become the landlord yourself. So the kinsman redeemer, there's a position called kinsman redeemer, and this is written into the laws in Israel, for God to make a way for the Israelites to regain their own land. God established a program whereby a kinsman redeemer could administer a land back to the original family. So the kinsman redeemer would pay the price for the land, but he would keep it for himself. In other words, he would buy the land for himself, but in that way, it would still remain within the family or within the tribe. So as a side note, and this is going to come up a little bit later, all of the inheritance, any kind of inheritance that's mentioned in the Bible, is given to the firstborn. In other words, the firstborn gets everything, but it's not necessarily for the firstborn to keep everything for himself. The idea was that he was the one to whom everything was given, and then he would distribute it among his brothers. So when we see that Jesus is the firstborn of all creation, or the preeminent one, the idea there in terms of inheritance is that all the things that he inherits, because he's worthy to inherit it all, he distributes among many brothers. I forget where it is, but somebody comes up to Jesus and says, my tell my brother to give to give me a part of the inheritance, or my share. And of course that's within the context that his brother has received the inheritance, and so far apparently hasn't given this brother his share of the of the inheritance. But that's the way it worked. So everything was done through the firstborn, and it's kind of a side note, but put that in your back pocket because it'll become relevant a little bit later. Clarence Haynes said, the concept of a kinsman redeemer comes out of the book of Leviticus. Leviticus 25:25, it says, if one of your fellow Israelites becomes poor and sells some of their property, their nearest relative is to come and redeem what they have sold. In other words, a family bailout. By definition, a kinsman redeemer was someone who redeemed what was lost. This could be the other person's property, it could be their freedom, or even their name. The kinsman redeemer might also be called on to exact revenge on somebody who may have killed their relative. So, typical scenarios: somebody kills somebody, and then the murderer runs to a city of refuge, and the kinsman redeemer's coming after them, that sort of thing. But in short, the kinsman redeemer was a rescuer. He was a restorer. He's also trying to bring justice of some kind. This is not a passive obligation, nor was it something that should be entered into lightly. And as you'll see shortly, there were some obligations necessary for the person who would be that kinsman redeemer. First of all, you had to be kin. You had to be willing. You had to be able to do this, obviously, and you had to pay the full price. You're not going to get a discount for the land just because you were part of the original family. You paid the full price. And we see this in Christ, that the Son of God became the Son of Man. In other words, that he became our kin. He joined the human family. So, and of course, he was willing, and he was sinless. So he was uniquely able to pay the price. The price wasn't going to be able to be paid by somebody who was sinful. So he's the only one who could qualify to be the kinsman redeemer in the case of the redemption of our bodies and of earth. And he had to pay the price in full. Let's look at the story of Ruth. The story of Ruth is, of course, that Ruth and her mother-in-law, they both lost their husbands, and they're going to Ruth returns with her mother-in-law to Israel, but they are in kind of dire straits and everything, and what happens is that she gets the attention of a man named Boaz, and what he's going to do is he's actually going to try to buy the land that that Ruth's husband, passed away husband, and Naomi's husband owned, and redeem that land, and with it, that land, he would redeem Ruth as well. So in this chapter right here, and I'm going to skip around a little bit, it says, now Boaz had gone up to the gate. That's where the deals were made, because it's out in public, and important people would sit at the gate. Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken of came by. There was actually one person who had dibs, and who was a nearer relative than Boaz was, and he had to be given the first choice in buying this land. And of course, with it, he would acquire Ruth. Then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. That's Naomi's passed away husband. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. Then Boaz said, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite. She's a Gentile, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. So the way that things were going to be divvied up afterwards, he didn't really want to do it because of the way that the inheritance would be divided up afterwards. Take right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. So when the Redeemer said this to Boaz, buy it for yourself, then Boaz said to the elders and all of the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belongs to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and to Mahlon. Those are the two dead sons. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife and to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Jesus is the purchaser of earth. And just like Boaz bought the land and with it also acquired his bride, Ruth, so Jesus also bought the land and redeemed his own bride. In Matthew 13, you're probably familiar with this parable. It says, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. I know that there's two angles that you can take on this, and that, somebody who finds the kingdom of heaven, gives up everything they have and, invests themselves in it. But in the other interpretation is that it was Jesus himself who considered his followers his treasure, and when he and gave up everything that he had. And what he did in order to do that is purchase the earth himself, in order to redeem that field so that he could have what was inside of it. The able kinsman redeemer. So the Son of God became man and is able to redeem man and the earth as man's kinsman redeemer. It says here in Hebrews 2, since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by the fear of death. For surely it is not angels he helps, but Abraham's descendants, who we understand now to be the believer. So Jesus is the inheritor. Just as Adam was the son of God and given an inheritance, even so Jesus, the Son of God, is given inheritance on behalf of man. In Psalm 2, it says, I will tell of the decree. The Lord has said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage and the ends of the earth your possession. There's a story in Jeremiah, and where he actually ends up buying a piece of land as a kinsman redeemer. And what's happening is that Jeremiah is in prison. Well, he's kind of imprisoned in the king's court somewhere, but he's been prophesying this whole time about how Babylon is going to, be successful. And Zedekiah just does not like Jeremiah and his prophecies, so he locks him up. And so he imprisoned Jeremiah because he didn't like it, and he was being told Nebuchadnezzar would be successful and that Judah was going to go into exile. But from prison, he gets a vision saying that the word of the Lord comes to him and says, your cousin's going to come over here, or your uncle, I should say, is going to come over here and ask you to buy this field. And I do want you to buy this field. So Jeremiah said, the word of the Lord has come to me. Hanamel, son of Shallum, your uncle is going to come to you and say, buy my field at Anathoth, because as the nearest relative, it is your right and duty to buy it. Just as the Lord had said, my cousin Hanamel came to me in the courtyard of the garden, said, buy the field at Anathoth in the territory of Benjamin, since it is your right to redeem it and possess it. Buy it for yourself. I knew that this was the word of the Lord, so I bought the field at Anathoth from my cousin Hanamel and weighed out for him 17 shekels of silver. Now think of this, Jeremiah. I mean, exile's about to begin. I mean, this is not. He's buying it for himself, but he's not really going to get to enjoy this or anything. You know, he's buying this for a future generation, basically. So I signed and sealed the deed, had it witnessed, and weighed out the silver on the scales. I took the deed of the purchase, the sealed copy containing the terms and the conditions, as well as the unsealed copy, and I gave this deed to Baruch, son of Neriah, the son of Messiah, and in the presence of my cousin Hanamel and the witnesses who had signed the deed, and of all the Jews sitting in the courtyard of the guard. So he's there in the guard courtyard.
It's amazing to hear that much silver.
Oh yeah, right. Well,
Just saying.
So in their presence, I gave Baruch these instructions. This is what the Lord Almighty. So how much silver was this?
17
shekels.
17 shekels. I don't know how much that is. In their presence, I gave Baruch these instructions. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Take these documents, both the sealed and unsealed copies of the deed of purchase, put them in a clay jar so they will last a long time. For this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Houses, fields, and vineyards will again be bought in this land. So he's doing this again for a future generation that's going to come back from exile and reoccupy that territory or live there again.
Oh, fun fact.
Yes.
We have seals from Baruch.
We have seals from Baruch, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Son of Neriah.
Wow.
Lived in that.
Wow, that's cool.
Places.
Yeah, somebody dug those up, huh?
That wasn't that much money.
So exile is not eternal. As Jeremiah's people were to repossess the land after exile, so are God's people to reclaim the earth when humanity's exile is over. You know, exile's not eternal, and there will be a day that we will repossess the land, and it's already begun. The title deed of the earth. It can't be right. The title deed of the earth. So this actually is from Revelation 5. And I think that this may be kind of like the most accurate kind of picture of what was going on with the seven seals in that picture. In other words, that every time something was written, you'd put a seal and then you'd have the next deed and another seal was put over it. So kind of a sequential thing. You look really closely, maybe you'll see the horses here and the sword here, the scales here, kind of following after the seven seals mentioned in Revelation. But this you could look at in part as the title deed of the earth. There's more than that going on here. But with the story of that we just read, that Jeremiah had bought that field and everything, you're going to look inside the scripture. There is sort of it seems to echo on that. Of course, it's really hard to say in Revelation if there's only one thing that's being referenced or symbolized there, because the other thing is that if you had, say, if there was a one of the Caesars and they had their kingdom was going to go to the next you know, they're the inheritor of that, of course, you know, then that inheritance was wrapped up in a seal. But it is all kind of inheritance language in any case. So yeah, it's title deed of the earth. It's also the right of kingship. There's some other things rolled up into this, no pun intended. But, so then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writings on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. I wept and wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scrolls and its 7 seals. He is the legitimate inheritor of this kingdom. He is also the legitimate kinsman redeemer." Then I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. The lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent into all the earth. He went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne. And when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's people. And they sang a new song, saying, "You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slain. And with your blood you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and people and nation. So you were, with your blood, you purchased them. So you are worthy to take the scroll and open it. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth." Then I looked and I heard, yeah, it's like there's that wording again. They will reign on the earth. So, you know, this isn't about getting rid of the earth, it's about reigning the earth. Then I looked and I heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands and 10,000s times 10,000s. They encircled the throne and the living creatures and the elders. In a loud voice, they were saying, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and the strength and honor and glory and praise." Then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea and all that is in them, saying, "To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honor and glory and power forever and ever." The 4 living creatures said, "Amen." And the elders fell down and worshiped. So some more comments from Jesse Boyd. So there is a deed of purchase, and this deed of purchase is in the right hand of God. It's legal evidence of Christ's payment of the redemption price, and therefore his right to rule the earth as tenant possessor and the recovery of man's lost inheritance. It is made irrefutable by 7 seals, impervious to tampering or change. And it was put in a secure place, like Jeremiah's, you know, putting him in a clay pot. But this was put in the ultimate secure place, which is in the right hand of God. So, kind of as a summary and conclusion, the promise of the land to Abraham and the land laws of Israel serve as microcosms of the human story. God had always intended to make man co-regents and inheritors of the earth. But man rebelled from co-regency, tried to go on his own, and thereby forfeited his inheritance, causing the ground to be cursed. So and as the sonless sin of man, Jesus became our human kinsman who was willing and able to pay the full price for our redemption, along with our inheritance, which is the earth. As the firstborn of creation, he is the rightful inheritor of the earth and is the one through whom the inheritance is distributed, quote, to many brothers. So he is he's the heir who received the full inheritance and has distributed it to many brothers.